Afternoon, I've come across a troubling story from the town of Batley in West Yorkshire. Um, Now, this is going around various news sources at the moment, so I'll just read out from the ITV one. There's different sources for this, but I'll read out from the ITV report. I just find this shocking, coming less than a year after the murder of Samuel Paty in France. Batley Grammar School staff members suspended as parents protest use of Prophet Muhammad caricature. And the report reads, doesn't say who the reporter is. Parents have been protesting outside Batley Grammar School this morning after a teacher allegedly, we don't even know it to be true, showed a caricature of the Prophet Muhammad. The school has unequivocally apologised for using a totally inappropriate resource in a religious studies lesson and has suspended the member of staff involved pending an independent investigation. The start of the school day was delayed until 10 a.m. as a result of the protest, with West Yorkshire Police present at the school gate. A statement from the school's head teacher, Gary Kibble, said, "The school unequivocally apologises for using a totally inappropriate resource in a recent religious studies lesson." Mr. Kibble told ITV News that the member of staff involved also wished to convey their apologies and that the school had withdrawn teaching on this part of the course. He added that it was important for children to learn about faiths and beliefs, but that it must be done in a respectful and sensitive way. Dr. Abdul Sheikh, a local academic in Batley and Muslim activist, read Islamist, said he had heard about the incident on social media on Wednesday night. He said, "I was shocked, like many Muslims in the town, that Muslim school children's religious sensitivities were completely ignored by the school teacher who decided to show an offensive image that lampooned the noble Prophet Muhammad. Every Muslim around the world holds the Prophet in the highest esteem. I feel that the schools should be allowed to complete their investigation in due course and find a fair and adequate solution that satisfies first and foremost Muslim pupils, their parents, and the wider Muslim community in Batley." However, the National Secular Society branded the protest as an attempt to impose an Islamic blasphemy taboo on a school. I think they're absolutely right. Stephen Evans, chief executive of the National Secular Society, said, "Teachers must have a reasonable degree of freedom to explore sensitive subjects and enable students to think critically about them." And the school's weak response will fuel a climate of censorship, which is brought on by attempts to force society as a whole to accommodate unreasonable and reactionary religious views. Well, I completely agree with the National Secular Society. Um, I don't think I need to clarify my position on Islamic fundamentalism and Islamic um, hardliners. But just to play the devil's advocate for a second, let's say the teacher had shown a cartoon of the Prophet as part of a debate, right? As part of a discussion around the image. Um, was that naive? Given the hysterical reaction that always comes from that, as a religious studies teacher, I think it's a male teacher that hasn't even been specified. There's a lot of details of this case that haven't been specified, but maybe that was a bit naive of him. But as the National Secular Society pointed out, do you want groupthink or do you want a situation where there is scope for teachers to explore different points of view? So, this religious teacher, he's not an imam. It's not his job to just give the children what they want. It's his job or her job to teach about faith and to, you know, um, create a discussion around it. Um, the thing that concerns me most about this, well, two things. Firstly, is the fact it's just come less than a year after what happened in France to Samuel Paty. That case was a very glaring example of how far Islamic fundamentalists will go. Importantly, in that case, the teenage girl who made the allegations has now admitted that she made it up. I hope she gets charged with wasting police time and with inciting hatred against a non-Muslim. Um, as for the attitude of the head teacher, now my gut instinct would be he's being a card, he's just caving into this mob. But there is also a side that schools have a duty of care to their staff. And if this teacher has been threatened, which is plausible, the report doesn't say that. Um, I've heard some people suggesting that he's been threatened. If that's the case, the school has a duty of care, and it might actually be that suspending him is for his own safety. Like if two students have a fight and the school suspends them, or to let them cool down. But that's not really the same thing. It's probably a bad example, but that might be the issue. But I think it's more likely that this head teacher is just basically caving into a mob. And mob-like behavior is not peaceful, no matter what they say. It's not peaceful. It's intimidating. It's threatening. When you get a mob of angry people, not obeying any social distancing rules, delaying classes for other students and other teachers, um, it's not peaceful. I think if I was a reporter, I would ask them, okay, you're protesting here today against a teacher. What's your views on Samuel Paty? Put them on the spot. Put them on the spot and let their true fundamentalist nature come out. Because, frankly, this is just the latest example of Islamic intolerance. I mean, if they thought the teacher was being unprofessional by showing an image of the Prophet, which is known to be offensive in Islam, why not just calmly express concerns and say, look, can you please reconsider this in the future, something like that. But instead, it's an enraged mob, gathering outside the gates. And I do think there would be, if the teacher hadn't apologized, hell, he might still be in danger. Who knows? I wouldn't put it past anything when it comes to Islam. It happened in France. Why couldn't it happen here? Um, and I think the three kinds of people involved in this sort of situation. There is hardline Islamic fundamentalists, and they tend to sort of go to the shadows, but they're very honest. They don't tend to hide what they believe, so that's quite straightforward. But then you get some Muslim, let's say, so-called moderates. I think there's genuine reformers, but then you get so-called moderates who will kind of talk in diplomatic language, but beneath the surface, like that activist, for example, on the surface his language might sound diplomatic enough, but read behind the lines, and what he's really saying is you have to respect our demands, our demands. You know, listen to the sensitivities of the Muslim children. No, it's their parents actually, but it's not a case of let's just discuss this, let's debate this. Um, it just you must obey our demands. I think the National Secular Society is onto something with that, and I think local politicians should express concern about the mob behaviour. I mean, it's breaking the social distancing guidelines for a start. So if nothing else, they're breaking the government's guidelines on that. But it's got echoes of the protests against the school. I think it was in Birmingham actually, where LGBT lessons were being taught. Again, it was mob rule. I don't care what the cause. Mob rule is not legitimate. It is what it is. It's the bully pulpit. It is the might is right. And I'm sick to death of Muslim hardliners and conservatives in this country thinking that they could just make demands and they have this right to be offended. My response would be, in our democracy with freedom of speech, you have the right to express dissent. You have the right to say you think it was wrong for the teacher to show the image, whatever it was. We don't even know the context of that. We don't know if he was showing a cartoon, if he was showing an image, if he was trying to elicit a debate. We don't know. So, they could say we think that was unprofessional, he shouldn't have done it. But to gather outside the school in that mob like way, it shows you where their thinking is. They don't stop to think, well, how does this look coming months after a French teacher was murdered over something similar? Murdered, savagely beheaded. I think France is showing more backbone than this country has, frankly, when it comes to standing up to Islamic fundamentalism. I um I respect President Macron for not not being PC on that. In this country, Even the Prime Minister is reluctant to really speak out on this sort of thing. I would expect Priti Patel to. She models herself on being a tough home secretary. She needs to really be vocally standing up for um, liberal democratic rights, which in this context should mean a teacher being able to do his job without facing threats. But it's not peaceful. Let's just discard that propaganda. Yeah, so I mentioned, yeah, three groups. So there's the hardliners, there's the so-called moderates who aren't really that moderate, and then there's non-Muslims. Now, this group I think is possibly the worst. They come out with these lines like, "Oh, it's their faith, we need to respect it," and it's just their culture, we need to respect it. They're moral minnows as far as I'm concerned, because they're putting religious sensitivities over safety, over freedom of expression. It's over the freedom to have an open education system where there's debate and discussion. It's chilling, quite frankly. And these useful idiots, these moral minnows, I think they're reprehensible because they enable this sort of attitude. This is the United Kingdom. It's not Pakistan. It's not Somalia. It's not another conservative Islamic country. We must start standing up for what's right. In this situation, I think the solution could have been for the school to say, we apologise if people feel offended by the format of this lesson, we will investigate it. But what happened was the Muslim community leader, self appointed, made demands that the school sack this teacher, otherwise, they wouldn't work with the school. Well, in that case, the head teacher should have said, "We're not going to be bullied. We're not going to be pushed around. We will listen to your concerns, but we're not going to be bullied." So it may be that the head teacher is acting out of, staff safety, but I think it's more likely that he's just caved in which case that's a bit cowardly on his part. But there is a lot of concerning issues around this. I mean, it's so galling to think it's less than a year that a teacher in our neighboring country, was savagely beheaded over perceived offence to Islam. But this just proves once again, you see, these protesters demand respect to the Prophet and the faith, but they fail to understand that every time they act this way, they have these hysterical tantrums and they get into mob rule. All it does is show Islam to be a very intolerant faith. I um I think it's very sad and immensely frustrating that as a nation we are not more outspoken. I think more politicians need to get backbone and speak out on this. Um, it's not even a case of I don't know. I just despair. I despair. It sickens me to the core. It enrages me actually because I think this is allowing bullies to win. Um, as for the regressives who enable this, I really think they're the worst sort of cards. People who will defend regressive attitudes on the grounds of we have to respect the religion. Moral minnows, absolute moral minnows, because they're putting religious sensitivity over the safety of a teacher. That to me is utterly gutless, reprehensible. And of course, it's mere people like me as, oh, you're engaging in dog whistle politics. Absolute cards.